That was really nice, Andy.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. I hadn't seen that.
He sent it to us at like 4 in the morning.
I look so competent. It's great.
So I think one of the primary things we're going to do is really let the smiths engage with you if you have some questions, or if you have questions about, the materials that we're using or any of the older videos especially. One of the things that we have been trying to do is run on the separate channel, on the Baltimore Knife and Sword channel, behind the scenes for at least all the major videos that we've been putting out. So if you're a fan of the show and you're watching a lot of those builds, that's definitely a place to go. And that way we can introduce some of the smiths and some of the other people who are working behind the scenes, because there's typically between 12 and 15 people behind the scenes when we're filming Man at Arms. It's filmed basically just like a television show. Matter of fact, most of the crew works on House of Cards, or worked, I should say, on House of Cards. Because Baltimore has a pretty tight, small filming community, and they have always been the group that we've used, even when the show was owned by Defy Media in LA. So we would still bring in, there were a few different directors of photography that we would bring in from the West Coast, but pretty much all the rest of the crew was local to Baltimore and Martian. So
I gotta tell you, with all those people doing filming, it's too many stinking people in the shop. I'm falling over people left, right, and center. I'm like, God, I just want to work. I just want to make swords.
Sometimes in the video it looks like it's actually it's a really large area, but for the most part it's very, very tight all the time.
We get real friendly.
Which makes it even more challenging when it comes to actually filming. They complain about space, but we have to figure out lighting and getting cameras in and out, all while trying not to be burned, stabbed, slashed, I don't know, you name it.
Lit on fire.
Lit on fire,
One time.
Yeah. So yeah, it can be very challenging, but definitely very rewarding when you
Getting another
see some of these very
cameraman
cool
woes.
visuals.
Woes of the cameraman. He's like, I'm just going to stand on top of this bucket, lean against this door that doesn't exactly latch, and then I'm going to just catch the shot now. Do it.
But we got it.
Hold it right there. Don't move it. Don't move it. Now you can move it.
Or you're doing it time sensitive. Hey, can you wait for 30 seconds to do that again?
Not really.
And that's another challenge too, is a lot of this is like you're running and gunning and you can't miss. Like when they do, what's it called when we do the, when we heat treat?
Oh, like the quench?
Yeah, we do the quench, you get one shot at it. So it's like, you definitely have to be in your game, you definitely have to be ready for it. So we'll do a couple, I think this run, we've been filming episodes, a few episodes over the last few weeks. And I think I may have had one of you as like a stand-in or just like practice going in and out just so I can get the visual and get my focus locked in and whatnot, so.
And then redo all the exposure when a giant lightsaber comes out of the forge and everything's just...
Exactly. Yeah, you kind of see it there. That the ending shot here is what I'm talking about. That shot. So you get one take at it, and then if you miss it, that's it. So got it this shot though, so it worked out.
Just like in any production like this, when you're filming, there are times when we have multiple things going on. There are occasionally templates that we've cut that we don't always show that kind of stuff on the show because people really want to see forging. So if we're cutting a template out of sheet metal and matching to it, sometimes you'll see that in the background if somebody's sizing to something. We don't often show that. But
I mean, we use it in the forging. We use our stencils and stuff for the forging. I don't think all those little ancillary stuff that have to go along with forging don't have to be on the street sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, it gets to a point where it's like, all right, what are you doing? I'm still drawing this billet out.
Or Hendy doesn't realize how fast we're moving, and we just kind of went, yeah, we needed to keep going. It had to happen in that order, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like, all right, this is gonna look like a blob until look at the sword.
It's not a blob.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of joking about when we're filming about fixing it in the edit, fixing it in post, and honestly, we really don't do it that much. There's very little that we would call Hollywooding. There's not a whole lot of that because there's actually so much footage of process that for a 12 to 16 minute video, we probably have, what would you say, there's probably 30 hours of footage.
Yeah, at least.
So
like forging
it's really
alone.
amazing.
Yeah, forging alone. because so we can't have it just go from blob of metal to sword. So you have to like, and the best way to get all the shots is just being there in the forge and watching them doing it. So it'll take like hours at a time, and we'll break it down over the course of maybe a couple days. But yeah, maybe like 30, 40 hours of overall footage that we have to then break down into 15 minutes or so that you guys aren't bored watching just like hours of forging. Though it's cool, but. Yeah, exactly.
You know why
We're
it
in the
takes
middle of
you know why
doing
it takes that long to get all that footage and everything else like that to get to the finished sword is because you make me grind in the dark. Like I'm really like worried about how much pressure I'm going to put into it. I'm like, just skim it. It'll just take a little bit off at a time.
To create the cinematic look of Man-at-Arms, which I think is fairly different from a lot of the other things on YouTube, which some people call the most overproduced show on YouTube. A lot of that is really lighting, and one of the things about lighting is all the house lights that we're used to working with, which we've made brighter and brighter year after year, so that we can see better in the shop. Well, they're all just turned all the way off. So
you got two in the far corners away from.
It becomes about how we create shadows and how things are backlit, and really very little about what the smith needs to see something. So for that cinematic look of the sparks rolling off the edge of a sword coming off of one of the big grinders, one of the things that has to happen there is the top of the blade has to be dark, and the top of the blade is exactly what anybody who's grinding, but specifically Paul, really needs to see. So we end up doing a lot of that grinding blind. Matt got so good at it for a while, he used to actually look away when he was grinding. So he would do it completely, not even looking at what he was doing, because he couldn't see it anyway. So it's just one of those things where we got a really good feel for that kind of stuff. One of the things that we don't really talk about is the changes with the show itself, up to the point where we produced and put out the SpongeBob episode and the Alucard Heirloom Sword episode. Those were the two last episodes that were filmed by the California company Defy Media. Defy Media made some big financial mistakes that had nothing to do with any of the shows they were producing, and they went away in a very ugly way. And in the process of that, the assets of their company, which included Man-at-Arms and all of the Almy channel, were purchased by a Vietnamese bank that, while they have a lot of assets in the video world, they don't really seem to know a lot about it. And it took me quite a few months to get to where we could take the show over and run the show completely in-house. And in the process of doing that, one of the main things that I did was to bring on the producer and director that had been working with us on the show since Tony Swatton had been involved, quite some time ago. And so that's really where we took that over. And so when we did Hand of the Patriarch for Xbox for Microsoft, that was really the beginning of the takeover where I became the producer for the entire series. And thankfully I was able to bring on the guys who had been doing it and kind of keep that look all along and work from there.
They're a pretty phenomenal crew. Like,
yeah,
they put in
great.
a lot of work.
Great crew. Brendan Kennedy, who's been at a couple of panels with us over the years and a couple of shows, because his family's in Philly, even though he's an LA producer here. And then the same directors that we'd worked with, who had done, I don't know if you look at the beginning of the show, Break Media, who did all the fail videos that were on YouTube, basically. Break and Smosh came together and formed Defy. And so they actually owned the show. So the guys were producing a huge amount of content, and Man-at-Arms was really their premiere show. And then they combined together with Robert Rodriguez to make the television version that we did for El Rey Television. Sadly, although El Rey is now on Roku, I don't believe that they're going to revisit producing the show with us, just because of the legality of when Defy went down. The show certainly was popular for them. But I don't think we'll be back to television, at least that way. But we will continue with the YouTube, as I said, mostly in-house, although we are bringing in the guys from the West Coast. So, love to hear from people what their favorite episodes were. That we've got a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that happened in a lot of those episodes that people don't know about, and be real interested in.
A lot of very silly situations.
Yeah, a lot of stuff, and if people have things they'd really like to see coming, forward, at this point we collectively make that decision. The only time that decision is made for us is if a brand like a AAA game or a movie comes to us. So, this time last year we were filming for Elden Ring. At the same time, we had just completed a multi-part series for Amazon, which was that giant berserker sword that we made. That episode was broken into 3, and they were released in the middle of the night because that was the client's requirement. So even though on the YouTube you might see they only have, I think, between 1 and 200,000 views, Amazon actually released them themselves and used them on their live stream, and they all have 2 or 3 million views in that way. We may still combine those 3 into a full episode, but it requires permission from them, which is not always that's super easy to get, because they don't want to they've put it out. They don't necessarily want to revisit it, even though we would really like to have a complete episode from that one.
It's almost as silly a situation as that whole sword was. It literally was. It wasn't a sword. It was an architecture of steel that we had to make shaped like a sword, and it weighed as much as I did. It's like 275 pounds.
Yeah.
From tip to top, it was as tall as me. It was silly.
It was kind of ridiculous.
Just a bit.
Just a little ridiculous.
I will pose a question to everybody here. By the end of the panel, think about what your favorite type of weapon is. A polearm, a sword. It could be a specific sword, a specific kind of weapon. You could throw it at us later.
Don't throw weapons at us.
Don't throw it at us.
Throw it at him. He'll fight you. I'm weak.
Anybody got questions? Got things to ask?
Yeah, how long were some of you involved in metalworking before you started specializing in swords?
Well, I'll start with that. I had been involved in the metalworking, but primarily knives and swords where my interests were since I was pretty young. My older brother, who is 3 years older than me, I can't remember, he only appears in one episode. I don't remember which one it is. But anyway, so he became involved with his best friend and started what would later become Baltimore Knife. And so the 3 of us, that was probably, I think we have paperwork going back to about 82. I left my job in 87 to pursue it full time. So quite some time. I'll give you these guys.
A while.
Yeah.
A solid while.
Yeah, a little bit of time. So the shop has changed over the years, and I've brought a lot of people in and out, and there've been an incredible number of artists in that time period. But we really didn't become a production facility where we were making a volume of swords and wholesale for Renaissance festivals, probably to closer to about 2000. That would be my guess, about 2000 when we started wholesaling rather than just retailing at what were conventions. We used to do a fair number of conventions in this region in the 80s. And if there were 3,000 people at the convention, that was a big convention at that period of time. And so there was just nothing really like 30,000 people or like Dragon Con. There was Gen Con and Origins were the only 2 big shows, and they were probably 5,000 people maybe at the most. And Origins traveled. I don't even know if it still exists, to be quite honest.
I'm not going to tell them how long ago that actually was.
That was a long time. That was in the 80s. Yeah, that was a long time.
I'll go next on that. Basically, I've been fighting in some kind of sword analog sport for the last 15 years. And I started making my own armor with leather and everything else like that. Went into metalworking, making rattan fighting armor. That's probably been about a decade now of just straight up making metal armor. And then you gave me a holler and you're like, I know how to bend metal. Can you come in and help me?
Yeah. We were super busy in the fall, and we couldn't keep up with orders in the fall of last year. And so what I did, I say last year, year before at this point, since we're in January. And so I called Paul because I literally had been talking to my dealers and said, hey, if we can produce some shields for you that fill your walls up at the Renaissance festivals where we can't make enough swords, can I bring in a guy, are you interested in selling shields that just take up more wall space? I mean, it seems crazy, but that was pretty much the case.
And he sold all of them.
And yeah, and the answer was certainly yes from everybody, because people just came out to outdoor shows where they don't have to be masked, you know, and things like that. And they just came out in huge numbers ever since those shows reopened in 21. So I think that's been a big part of the expansion for us as well. And certainly it doesn't hurt that we have Man-at-Arms that kind of acts as an advertising wing for the company. And so that's just kind of.
Well, I mean, we got the shields done. Then you realized I could use a grinder and not like lose all my fingers.
Yeah, yeah. We always need somebody who can learn the skill.
Who won't. You don't have to worry about being a risk in your shop. Like, hey, don't use your hand. Good plan.
You might have seen Paul was on Night Fight on History Channel.
I hit people real good.
Yeah, it was a fine all-star.
Well, I mean, the first time I really met you was after the steel fighting thing, and I came in and I was getting armor made by Ilya. He made my helmet in my hands.
Right.
But then you had me come in and be the guy to swing Sauron's mace. That
right.
episode back in the day.
That's right.
And break stuff because it was 75
that big
pounds.
monster guy who's swinging Sauron's mace.
But yeah, and then I've been doing it as a full-time gig with you, and it's been pretty phenomenal. I mean, I get to make swords every day. How is that not fun? Swords. We all like swords. We're in the room to like swords. So.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Hi, I'm Gary. I was hired in February of last year. So I'm coming up to about a year now. It's fun.
I'll clap for that too.
Yeah, clap for that too.
It's been wild.
What are we at AA?
Hi, I'm Gary.
Hi, I'm Gary.
So
Make fun of that.
I won't. I'm sorry.
Prior to my time at BKS, I did a traditional foundry apprenticeship, focusing on making and casting iron and steel. And so that's kind of shifted my perspective on the metallurgy of forging itself, and that's forced me to go into knife making, because knife making is just forging with a little bit of science and a whole lot more pedantry. And you really lean into that, and the apex of knife making always turns out to be chef knives. And as someone who does not like making knives, but does like making myself suffer, I started making chef knives. And in January of 2021, I met this idiot. And he's like, hey, I'm a chef. And I'm like, wow, so you know what a chef knife is supposed to be like. And
Gary likes food. Gary likes really good food.
I'm
and Andrew makes really good food,
motivated.
so bribe your chef.
But I've been metalworking for about 9 years prior to my hiring by Carrie. A random phone call in January. He sent me a text, hey, this is Carrie Satter from Baltimore Dinosaur. Can I call you? I'm like, I'm about to cook dinner.
And we didn't know each other at all.
I'm getting scared.
Well, I had met you for about 30 minutes. And I'm like, sure. He calls me. He's like, hey, I hear you're through the grapevine. You live in Baltimore now. You want to come work with me? I'm like, when do I start? At the time, I was driving an hour and a half one way to go work at a shop.
You were a kid in the candy store when you saw all the tools, though.
Me like Big Hammer. I'm a simple man.
We had a mutual friend who kind of referred him to me, just kind of sent me, I think, a message on Facebook and said, hey, I know that you're a little shorthanded. You should check this guy out. And, you know, first look, it's like, I mean, age is an issue because he's very young. He's a child. And
I'm about to be 25.
So I had to look and see, you know, what's the skill set? How does it fit? Do we have time to train somebody new? And the more I looked into him, I was like, wait a minute, he's demonstrating at Renaissance festivals, he's doing casting work, and I realized that he had, at very least, the basis for what we needed for somebody to really help us out in the shop. And it turned out very quickly that there was much more to it. He had a lot more depth than I think you would expect.
Good job. You can't lose. You haven't lost your hand
for somebody
yet.
who still can't rent a car.
Hey, in a few weeks I'll be able to rent a car, okay? Fuck you. But my chef knife journey started really taking off because of Andrew, who has the practical knowledge and application of understanding chef knife geometry. And it's your turn.
Hi. I'm Andrew. As he was saying, I was actually a chef in downtown DC over in Chinatown. and we just opened a new restaurant, and I was kind of stressed out. So I was like, okay, I want to find a different outlet. So I went and found a makerspace and met this guy,
Hi.
and just kind of got obsessed with that. And then COVID happened. So my COVID hobby was, I want to learn how to make knives, chef knives specifically, and just got obsessed with that for a long time.
He made a lot of paring knives.
Yeah, because I kept messing them up. But anyway. So like I started an LLC, I started selling things on Spotify, stuff like that, and then Gotti got the job at BKS, and Carrie was actually nice enough to let me use some of the tools in the shop for the knife making, and I guess, I don't know why.
The real truth is that we were still shorthanded because things were still building, and I think John kind of gave Andrew a couple tasks here and there. And then we asked him if he could come on for a day or two a week for a little bit to try out and kind of see how things were. And at the end of the first day, John looked at him and said, "Are you coming back tomorrow?" And he looked at me, and I just looked at John and I said, "You can do whatever you want." And John was like, "You're working here now."
And it's been 7 months.
Yeah.
I started full time my first day.
Yeah, so it's been great. Mahendra's a different story. We actually haven't made him make any swords yet.
He
we'll
wants
get there.
to learn.
We'll get there.
I want to do an episode where, so I have no background in any of this stuff. I do video and photography, and I want to do an episode where they take me through some things and see what I can.
Do you want to do a teaching montage?
Yeah, a training montage. And it ends with me being able to make a knife or something. I don't know.
Robin.
You guys have any interesting backyard stories?
Stop it.
They're friends. We're going to ignore him. And
What you got, boss?
I had a great conversation with a couple of smiths on the show floor earlier about the Falcata, but it made me wonder, are there any weird or exotic weapons, fictional or other, or real, you haven't had a chance to make yet that you'd love to take a swing at?
there's always a few, but there's a couple that, like, there's one that he and I talk about that we'll have to think outside of the box a little bit of how to make the show, kind of like what we've done with the club, with the gaffy stick, and we did with a couple of things with Sam when he did the baseball bat with the big spikes in it and stuff, which is a big Japanese war club. Oh yeah. Because that's like such a cool thing. I mean, they're so cool.
Club
but
go
like,
bomb.
how do we have to give some thought to process, because it's a little different for us, because I think you've probably heard me say it on the show, if it's a piece of wood, we either grind it or burn it. I mean, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So when it comes to doing better woodwork, we have to either step back and think about it, or we'll bring in somebody who does more of that type of thing.
We throw Rick at it.
Yeah, Rick is certainly an option.
Or throw me at it.
In the case,
Yeah.
while I'm a tool fanatic. I buy incredible stuff.
It's an addiction.
Be it historic or new, it doesn't really matter. I want to be able to do every process in the shop. But sometimes I've never done the work. I have basically never turned any wood on a wood lathe. I mean, it's a relatively simple thing that has a lot of depth that you can learn. But I still haven't done it. Like the wood, if you go back, I'm sure there's some episodes where I've done some wood turning on my metal lathe. But Sam had already done a lot of wood turning when he started with us. So when we did, I guess it was that Fallout build where we did a challenge build where he makes that baseball bat. He just threw up a piece of wood, cut out a baseball bat. He practiced it quite a bit and had probably done it on kind of rinky-dink machinery. And I have very, very nice equipment in the shop. Once again, because we want to make sure that we can do every process in the shop, even if it's something that we're jobbing out or bringing in another person. We want to be able to do it both for the show, but really it's just kind of where my interest is. So the lathe that we use for wood turning is actually a metal spinning lathe. So I think we've only done metal spinning on, we only did it on the Art of War, so only on the television version. I don't think we've done any yet on Reforged, but at some point we will, where we can, I think we formed the end cap for, no, actually it wasn't Art of War, because it was Danny Trejo, but it was actually on Reforged, so it was Battlefield 1. was the Trench Club from Battlefield 1. Yeah, I think we do some spinning where we take some brass that we've cast and rolled out and spin it down onto the handle.
All I know is that every time you turn on those lathes, I get spooked out because I'm like, nope, it's moving way too quick, buddy.
And then there's the rolling mill.
Yeah.
The rolling mill, no, I'm completely okay with the rolling mill, even though it will eat the whole world. If you get one edge of it caught in there, it's going to take
It's
the whole
so much
world
torque,
with
it doesn't
I think
care.
Spooky.
It doesn't care.
But the lathes, I'm like, it's just going to chuck the 20-pound piece of metal out of it and just go through the building.
Like a power hammer's any better.
It's really safe. I just don't trust it at
Guys,
all.
let you guys talk about the scary parts. Do you guys have like other weapons that you guys are really interested in doing
weapon?
something different? What? You're smiling. There
It's
must
a
be
fantasy
something.
weapon.
I really want to make a naginata.
Yeah.
Really badly.
Oh yeah.
We all want to make historical weapons too. That's the problem.
Yeah, naginata is basically like the polearm version of a katana. Once again, which we have made a few, but we did make those for the television series for Art of War. They were not for Reforged. So, and I don't think, I mean, other than the fact that there is a Spanish dubbed ripped copy on YouTube of the Art of War series, there's actually nowhere that you can go and see that right now. It's ridiculous. It's just tied up kind of maybe forever in legal. I'm doing my best to get that changed so that either I can put it up or I've talked to El Rey about putting it up on their YouTube as well, or on Roku, but I think it's just going to be tied up for the time being. I have spent some time trying to get the current owners of Almi, while they have no involvement basically, they just pull the revenue off of YouTube. That's pretty much all they do. They're not at this point willing to sell it to me. If they've sold it to me, then I can work directly with El Rey and we can probably clear up that litigation and get that situated. I'm really hoping that that's the case because I still have a pretty good working relationship with the people at El Rey, with Robert Rodriguez, and his sons actually are kind of controlling a lot of that stuff.
I gotta
and
tell
so
you,
hopefully we can make that happen.
It's a constant lament about that too, but I gotta say, like, once we figure out whatever you can come to with them, we'll be in a lot better place. But fantasy weapon, a group of fantasy weapons I want to make is the stuff from Elden Ring. I want to make the Executioner sword from the Elden Ring. There's some great ones in Elden Ring.
Yeah.
And that big axe is silly.
Two weapons. I really want to make Griffith's rapier from Berserk, the 1997 adaptation or direct from the manga.
Specifically.
Yes, we don't talk about 2016. Or a dark saber. Because like it's so cool. Yeah, I would like that one. I have a Mando helmet. I'm gonna make a Mando suit if we make a dark saber.
Crossover.
How about do it? Do it.
Terrible.
So yeah, dark saber or Griffith's rapier.
Either that or anything from Soul Calibur 2.
Literally anything
Yeah.
from Soul Calibur 2.
Soul
Yeah,
Calibur
pretty
2's
much.
done. Like, sold me on it. Anybody else got any questions?
Cassandra Main.
Yo,
So, Gary, we
Hi.
met at Honors Hall,
we did.
and I just wanted to know, because I met Gary outside of this, he actually introduced me to all this, what interest do you guys have outside of making weapons? Like, do you guys have model trains or like hitting butterflies?
I have a
One of them,
terrible historic Jaguar habit.
Oh no.
He says habit.
It's pretty bad.
Terrible.
Wait, you're
terrible
not gonna
habit.
talk about the rose engines.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't.
That's a part of the tool fanaticism.
Yeah, historic tools is pretty bad, and I became very obsessed with what are called ornamental turning engines, which are the machines that would be used to cut the patterning on Fabergé eggs or like Cartier cigarette cases that have patterning behind the colored enamels that are on the surface. Those machines are very rare. And they essentially require a lifetime of work to really get the patterning down. But to get the general idea of them, they're what a spirograph is based on. And once again, that's a boomer thing. Maybe I don't know how many people are sorry about that. But I know that it came back at some point in the 90s.
I had one.
So between the historic machinery, but particularly engraving machines, and my car habit is pretty bad.
It's horrific. I play Magic the Gathering, and I beat people up with swords. It's fun.
I do play a lot of League of Legends, believe it or not.
Yeah.
A lot.
Too much. I didn't go to bed until 3 in the morning. Why'd you do that? I was playing League.
I was playing Heimerdinger.
I was pushing mains, needed to do it. Oh my god.
Yeah, exactly. Well, as mentioned, we met at a LARP because nerds. Outside of that, I actually really am into like model rocketry. It's just, I find it's neat.
I didn't know he was interested in that at all.
Not at all. That's why I laughed.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yo, can we attach G.I. Joes to him?
You're implying I haven't already done that.
Yeah.
What you? Next.
What do you do for funsies?
I'm a very one-track mind kind of person. I just look at like sword and knife content all day.
He makes broth.
Yeah. I grow houseplants. So
He says, "Oh, I grow houseplants." You think, "Oh, succulents." You know, that's great. No, dude's got a monstera bigger than Paul.
I got a 7-foot monstera. It's pretty big.
It's pretty cool.
It's like 4 years old.
It's huge. We'll let you, Andy.
And I actually met Hendy because he was my wife's personal trainer.
Yeah, that's actually. Yeah, it's funny how that works. So, you know, because when you first start and you're getting into like the industry, he was just taking a couple of jobs. So I was a personal trainer for a while, a couple of years while I was doing video on the side, and I was training Carrie's wife. One day, I think it was around 2020.
Right, we were shooting Art of War, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were shooting the TV show.
Carrie mentioned bringing someone in just to kind of do some stuff around the shop, and so I came by for the TV show, and then I guess the funny, I guess the common thing that happens is Carrie invites you to the shop, and then you just end up working for him, and you don't leave. So I think all of us here are kind of victim of that.
God, you're the
send help if you can, please. No, I'm kidding.
Blink twice.
I will say that it is a welcoming environment, and the fact that the team all works in different aspects and we all can come together for common goals and trying to make the shop better. It makes everything great. It's trying to deal with 5-6 artists in one building is ridiculous, though.
No. 5 to 6 artists in one building working with fire and swords.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why it keeps it calm.
I haven't stabbed any of them yet.
That's why I think that's because the other guy has the ability to do it too.
No. The last shared shop that I worked in, that's another story.
No. Don't bring that in.
No, it's extraordinarily satisfying, like my first couple weeks to see it's like, okay, he's grinding the sword. I guess I'm going to make the guard. He's going to do the pommel. And then it's going to get finished all together. So it's just, you watch the week, you see stuff become things. It's like, oh, it's the guard, it's the pommel. It's like, oh, it's a whole thing now.
Yeah, or it's like, Kevin's over there and I hear the induction forge beeping and I'm like, what is he doing? And I look and he's doing like a complex pineapple twist or dragon scale twist. I'm like, I'm gonna make a fancy pommel for it. And then, I put a pommel down, he shows up and puts a guard down and they match and I'm like, nice.
It's a solid collective and application of skills.
And we're all idiots too.
Oh, terrible. Yeah.
We have very similar senses of humor, and a lot of them involve very dry jokes sometimes or poorly timed sounds.
It's like being in an episode of Faulty Towers sometimes. Married couples.
Oof.
I love Faulty Towers.
It's actually really rewarding for me, to be honest. I would like everybody in the entire shop to be able to learn how to do everything, even if it's not their level of expertise, or it's not necessarily what they're going to be doing in kind of quantity, because we certainly have an incredible workload. But as they begin to understand what the other person is doing, it allows them to play off of that and be more and more creative. And as the group becomes more creative, it's more rewarding for me. There certainly was a time, there were many years, as I said, I left my job in '87. There were many years that I worked alone, and and that was rewarding. You know, I learned, although you learn much slower when you work alone, but working with a larger group, even though artists in general can be difficult when you put 8 or 10 of them in a room and don't let them leave. It has been really fantastic, and I feel like right now we're currently at one of the best groups that we've had as far as everybody being able to work together. And under, I mean, a fair amount of pressure. To give you an idea, in October, we made an average of over 100 swords a week.
It's a lot of swords by any metric.
It kind of blows my mind that we were able to do that. And like I said, that's a portion of why we've kind of dropped off on the videos, but we're trying to solve that, you know, again by being a little more active in kind of catching that process. And some of what we've got coming up are blades that we are making for sale. So it kind of crosses over. So Hendy's coming in and, I mean, there's a little more to it, but essentially he's coming in and catching us in process and catching those processes. So it's even more of a reality type thing than what Man at Arms is.
Yeah.
So
let's move on to the next question. In your front, you have one?
Yep.
Your guys' favorite build so far?
No. I mean,
I'm gonna cop out and say the one I'm working on right now.
yeah, now let's say that.
No.
Yeah.
It doesn't count.
Wait.
Yeah, you can tell them.
The one we're doing right now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. We're doing it's like a 2v2 kind of competition thing. We're making orc weapons. So it was me and Gotti and Paul and Kevin on 2 different teams. And
Kevin's our primary blacksmith.
Yeah.
I can tell you one word about that episode. It's going to be tetanus.
I was gonna say crunchy.
Tetanus.
That's all silver, by the way. That whole thing is solid.
It's a
It's
spooky,
nuts.
pretty weapon.
We should bring that out. We should bring that out.
I like it.
Yeah, burglars, come here.
I'm also gonna cop out and say a build I was not a part of, but it's my favorite fandom. So the Lance of Longinus by Derek and Ellen. Those two are very entertaining.
He's
and
just been hanging on to it.
excessively skilled, and also it's a cool piece.
He's been hanging on to it the whole weekend.
See, the thing is, like, I don't like making knives. I like the traditional architectural style construction blacksmithing, and that is the apex of those two mixed.
Yeah, no, that's reasonable.
And also, it's cool. And red.
My 2 favorite, I can't really pick one between the 2, but my 2 favorite of what the finished product becomes are really Alucard sword and the lightsaber katana. They're 2 of the visually simpler pieces, although I think the katana especially, because the blade has a lot of, and the hamon in the blade is really very nice. They're the ones that I guess I find the most pleasing to my eye and my hands. I like the feel of both of them.
They're both phenomenal weapons.
But I can't ignore what was done with the Berserker sword that we did for Amazon, because that was so out of the box for us. I mean, it certainly was not anything that we couldn't do, but it was like, how do we make this entertaining when we're just making this giant sculpture? And I was really intimidated to just hand off the 2 lions to Derek and to Ellen. They were very complex forms and really kind of outside of the box. I thought I was going to have to step in and become involved. I did extensive training in creating those forms with a Bulgarian master named Valentin Yutkov, and I thought that I would have to really step in on that. Instead, they just create those 2 lion's heads, and they are absolutely unbelievable pieces of work for people who've not done that work before.
Well, how many months of work is that lion's head in like a controlled setting?
Each one of those lion's heads should have been at least a 30-day process for an artist, and they did them in about a week a piece, and they were the first thing that either one of them had made, and they made them essentially match.
We also made other things during that time.
Yeah, but I'm saying they were,
Yeah, but
those two
they had made other things
Yeah.
in the same time period.
Yeah, Derek was piecing,
All kinds of things
stuff
together
at the same time.
I have to say the Berserker sword, because that thing is crazy.
Yeah.
The amount of time that was taken to just try and figure out every angle and how far this thing needs to actually go. Why is it 5 inches wide, thick here? Why is it 2 inches thick here? Just losing our minds.
I'd say everybody in the shop who was on that build was sweating the whole way through from beginning to end.
And it looked great.
I don't think there was ever a time when we felt like we would fail within our timeline on that. There was less pressure. Part of that was because Amazon financially took care of us on that, so that if we had to run over, we could have. But we had recently come off of the filming when we had made Godfall, and the blade for Godfall was the first time in a very long time that I thought that we would not complete the filming in time that what we needed. I was rather certain that the weapon for Godfall actually, I would say,
Is it this one?
was not finished
Yeah, that one.
any time before we went to these final shots right here. The glue on the handle was still hot when we shot those shots. The bronze work on that just took an unbelievable amount of time, and we had multiple failures that were just bad communication between myself and Ference. It really fell on me, because I just said, hey, make this thing for me. Here's a picture, go make this thing. And that's what I usually do to Ference. And he knocks it out of the park. And he got the form for me, but getting that form in the sand casting and getting a good result was extremely difficult. So even though I'm pretty sure in the show we showed that as the sand cast product, those products never worked. We actually made a series of molds in rubber that we then cast wax, and then cast the wax into bronze and did a lost wax casting that you see us do most of the time, because we just simply couldn't make that work correctly the other way. So that would be one time where, even though it is casting and we did make it completely, we kind of Hollywooded that. We call that Martha Stewarting, where we just do a swap like that, where we were casting multiple things. But for that to happen, I stayed up for probably 3 days in a row, solid, working on that. And the only other time that we'd had that happen was when we did the Phantom Blade for Ubisoft for Assassin's Creed. So when we did the Phantom Blade, we only had 3 days to shoot that, because it had to come out. By the time they decided to do it, we had no time before that video had to come out, so it had to be edited right then. And we actually ran a day over on that build, so we ended up running 4 days. And during that 4th day, while I was working, finishing up that Phantom Blade, which is the one that shoots, it has like a crossbow that also shoots, that is when Matt and Ilya did the Tomahawk Challenge, because there was the whole crew was sitting around doing nothing. And at the time, Defy Media was spending the money for an extra day, which is about $10,000 a day to shoot Man-at-Arms. And so we were like, how can we recover this with another episode? And that's when we decided to do the Tomahawk Challenge, where Ilya forges one and Matt makes the Assassin's Creed Tomahawk, which Matt kind of cheated, because we had already made that. We actually did all the prototyping for Ubisoft in the first place. So in Assassin's Creed 3, all the weapon sounds that you hear were actually done by the Foley group. They're not digital, they're actually analog. They're taken off of weapons that we made for them. So we made all the weapons from Assassin's Creed 3, and they treated them like a big thing of chimes, and basically used them, to create all the sounds in the game. So they were all analog.
Let's get next.
That's Phantom.
Anybody got a quick question?
EJ.
Oh, Lord.
You want a longer one, or you want to get a quick one?
Do it.
For each of you, if you had to design, make, and produce an item in the shop to survive the zombie apocalypse that you would use, what would you make?
Did you see the Zombie Apocalypse Challenge with 3 builders?
No, I haven't seen that.
Well, that sounds like a failure on your part. There's an episode to answer your question. How about somebody else?
What's a weapon you actually do not want to
I actually have an answer for that, and
Lord.
I believe we are absolutely going to do it. And I'll tell you why. We did for Art of War, we did a Zulfiqar, which is a two-bladed, it's essentially a forked blade, Islamic blade.
It's a tunic.
And the plus and minuses, I think it's a great form. There's a lot to talk about, but it is emotionally, religiously charged weapon that when we produced that, I felt like we did a very good job. Illy did a fantastic job. The blade is absolutely fantastic. And I don't own it. I wish I did, but at the time it went to the producers on the West Coast. But El Rey then created a kind of behind the scenes show where they talked about whether a weapon was good or not, and they kind of dissed the weapon. And it is, while the most popular by views episode they ever created, it has a huge negative response because it's a religious thing in the Islamic world, and so you have to be careful with it. But I actually really like the weapon, and I think that we will probably at some point return to that. But we'll tread carefully, which is difficult because we don't tend to tread carefully on things. We tend to kind of steamroll ahead.
Do you guys want to make chakra?
So I think that would be something that we would do.
You want to make frisbees with blades?
We made those.
We should make more of them.
Yeah.
Everyone's gonna love us.
Yeah.
Quick questions.
A lot of times you say I made weapons for movies. Can you tell us specifically which movies?
Well, I can't tell you about the one that we're involved in right now with Netflix, but yeah, I mean, really the only specific movie that we worked with is we did the weapons for Antonio Banderas for SpongeBob, which the studio then chopped the blades off and welded on a spatula so that he could flip hamburgers with it. So that's primarily the thing that we've done. I don't think there's anything off the top of my head that we've worked while we've worked for the movies. A lot of times that stuff has not appeared in the movies, and we're working on the lead weapon for what was originally going to be a single movie on Netflix is now a 3-episode thing coming up that we're working with a couple of smiths that are outside of the area. That's probably all I can say, but it's in process.
Stop. Just stop. You're on an NDA.
Yeah.
When you're running the shop in mass production mode, what processes are you using for the blades? Are you cutting or are you still forging?
We are doing absolutely everything that you can imagine. Now,
Yeah.
for the bulk, we have a special alloy that we use. They are quite a large quantity of them are laser cut, and we will harden, but all the process after that is done in-house. And we used to plasma cut a lot of things, which you've seen us use the CNC plasma table, but the quantity is beyond what we could do ourselves now, and so we have our material delivered to a laser house that works all from our drawings that we've always had, but they cut for us, and actually getting things back from the laser house is so much cleaner that it's actually cheaper for us to job it out than it is to do it ourselves because of the cleanup.
It was like 11.
And it would also require a couple more people in the shop to be able to process that much. But there are a few things that we do where we have them cut preforms for us. So we'll have a preform cut, even though we may be forging it after the fact. A lot of our sword guards are actually a preform. They already have a slot, basic slot that matches the blade, but there's no form on the piece. And so Kevin spends a huge amount of time forging from these preforms that are just like sticks with a hole in the middle, basically. And then he'll work from that. Some of that we grind and polish and has gentle forming, but for the most part that stuff either goes into the induction or goes into the forge, is red hot and then formed there, and that's how we get that organic shape after the fact.
For most of the processes with the blades, we're heat treating, we're tempering, we're doing everything to make it as tough and as durable as humanly possible, because a lot of our blades are actually being sold to people that do stage combat and stuff like that. So they're actually going to be swinging at each other with these swords, and they're blocking a lot, and everybody forgets how to parry block, or how to side block instead of blocking with the edge. So So we have to use a tougher metal for that. Then everything is straightened, ground, run through all of the processes to make it a clean finished sword, all by hand by the crew and us working at BKS. And then after that, we start like playing around and making art. Like, hey, how can we make this look cooler? How many extra facets can you add onto that? How is your knife wielding skills today? Your wrist set, you can do it. And we just let them run wild, and I get yelled at when I screw up.
We don't yell, never.
No, sometimes we do because we all wear hearing protection. He's like, "Hey, Paul, what?"
No, my tinnitus happens.
Huh?
Yeah, what?
There is a kind of a beautiful thing that we do have in the shop.
Is there a siren
though.
going out outside?
Yeah, exactly. There's a beautiful thing that happens in the shop though, where yes, a longsword is a longsword, but we also have essentially complete creative control over the hardware and the visual style of what happens in that longsword. Like, hey, do you edge grind every sword? Do you full grind every sword? Do you leave the fuller black? Do you go back and polish the fuller? Do you leave the
I'm
flats
literally
black?
just dusting the wind on it, man. Like we're doing whatever we're doing.
It's we can go as complex or as simple.
Yeah, we get some direction from the dealers that we're working for. It's only a handful of people at this point in time. We take very, very few custom orders just because of time frame. But our primary dealer, like when he sends us an order now, he sends us a wish list because he knows he's not getting
it all
exactly what he's asking for.
Man, it's
because
insane.
It is really, really nice to be able to kind of produce anything that we want. So first it's got to be a sword, and it has to be in some manner aesthetically pleasing, obviously, or it's not going to sell. It's just going to sit on the shelf. But outside of that, you know, if we've got either a process that's inspired us or a historic piece that's inspired us, we're wide open to create anything like that we want. There's certainly some things that we do over and over again that we've found that have sold well. When we're doing falcata, typically they'll have a forged horse head for the pommel. That horse head has just been a consistent seller for us. People really, really like it. But that blade could have any kind of design on it, from a hamon, like, you know, when we were doing the pieces, we did the copus, like a falcata that we did for Ubisoft, or pieces that we have chiseled designs on that could have a fuller in them. You know, we use a knife wheel where we cut the back of the spine so that it has kind of a zigzag in it, or different polished parts. Some parts are blackened, some parts are polished. When we get the blades, typically Paul, if he's the person grinding the edges, or Bill if he's in the shop, and we get something that the surface of the blade has this really nice kind of crunchy surface and it's consistently black, he may only grind and polish the edge and not polish the entire sword.
Make swords evil again.
Yeah, kind of, you know, it gets that blackened look on a sword. But a lot of times you have to pick and choose that as you get each individual blade in your hands and kind of make that decision. So we couldn't go in. If somebody said, make 20 black swords, it might actually be difficult because we don't really know the consistency of what things are until they come out of heat treat.
Every day at work is a free day in the art classroom in 5th grade.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I want you to go back there real quick. Free day, you can do whatever you want. That's basically how we can move along with steel. We all have a pretty strong skill set, and if we don't understand, we can go and pitch an idea to one of the guys that knows how to do it, and they're like, oh, that actually sounds pretty cool, let's try it.
I don't think it would stay interesting enough at the level that we have to do with the group that we have. I think people would burn out a little too fast otherwise. You know,
the humdrum would be a terrible thing. But then we also have moments where where somebody's like, I have the hankering to do a Damascus sword, or I found this really cool looking piece of steel that I want to use for a guard. Let's make a blade for it. And then we make fancier swords that we sell to the vendors. We make videos of them or do something random with them to make money.
Yeah, like pretty early on when I got hired, I found and fell in love with small swords. And I was kind of obsessed with them for a little bit. I still am.
You still am.
But like, I'm like, oh, I want to learn how to make small swords. And so I did what any sane person would do, and I forged 3 Damascus small swords. And Bill taught me how to grind them, because I grind chef knives like this. We grind swords now. I'm not used to that.
No, you still grind diagonally.
I do grind diagonally. I can't do that. But Paul grinds swords straight up and down on a wheel, and I grind chef knives on a I'll wear heels. I grind chef knives on a flat platen. The geometry there is inherently different. And so a small sword is 1, small, 2, a sword. And 3, there are a whole bunch of different types of styles that you can go.
They're real complicated.
Yes, I'm aware. You can have a hollow grind on the back end and have a trifoil with a nice little "ny" as your back. And with Damascus, you're exposing more and more layer lines, you're exposing more character within the pattern itself, and if you forge it at a higher layer count, every hit of the power hammer adds more and more distortion to the piece. So you're not only thinking about, okay, what do I want this pattern to look like? You're thinking about, what is what I am doing going to do to this pattern? Am I gonna have ripples? Am I gonna have straight layer lines? Am I gonna have a zigzag off-center wave over here and a C over here and a W over there?
Cause and effect is very apparent.
Yes. If you ever want to know how Damascus forges, learn how to make croissants.
Yeah, croissants.
It's literally the same exact
So that happens when you got a
process.
couple of cooks in your
Now
shop.
I'm hungry, man.
I'm not a cook. I just like eating.
I've made lots of them. Okay, we got time for one quick question that I want to know about your favorite weapon. Or what kind of weapon is your favorite? What you got?
What advice would you give to people that want to get into more playmaking but don't have the space to get equipment?
Okay. Clarify. How much space do you think is not enough space?
Oh, God.
I have a utility room.
So is it 5 by 5?
Yep.
Cool. Do you have power?
Yep.
Do you have ventilation?
I
Good enough. You can't do fire. However, you can do stock removal. So what you can do is you can go to Harbor Freight, get a 1x30 belt grinder, get an angle grinder, and get a cheap vise that you can put on a bench. If you don't have a bench, get a 6x6 from whatever hardware store. Put your vise on the bench. Congratulations. That's all you need. If you want to have it look forged, you can get a ball peen hammer, polish it up really nice, and when your steel is soft, you can hammer texture it. If you can't get any heat treat equipment, or if you don't have anyone local that can heat treat for you, you can mail things out and get them heat treated. That way you don't have to worry about breaking a blade. You can have it done to performance spec heat treat, and it's going to be like $15 or $16 plus shipping, and shipping a blade is like $5.
And check your area for maker spaces that have that, you know, and also blacksmith guilds, because
Historical societies.
there are if you're in this part of the world, there are a lot of blacksmith guild spaces that you can become a part of and you can have access to. I don't know where you are, but they're all over the place. But certainly here in the Northeast, it's pretty easy to find yourself within 20 minutes to a half hour of a space that you can go to and do that. You know,
in Virginia,
that's a big part of it.
In Virginia, you have the Old Dominion Blacksmith Guild, you have the Chesapeake Blacksmith Guild, you have the Blacksmith Guild of the Potomac, you have the whatever the Richmond one.
A bunch of them.
Yeah, you've got 6 different guilds. You have a wide array of makerspaces with blacksmithing programs. In Maryland, you have a different array of guilds. Just look in Blacksmithing Guild or Makerspace.
Look it up online, because blacksmiths love to talk about blacksmithing.
You'd be surprised how close one is probably to you.
Like, they just post pictures of random knives and swords and stuff, which is fine. That's perfectly cool.
Within 50 miles of DC, I can tell you 6 different shops that are open to the public.
Yeah. So that certainly can be a solution for you. And then, you know, it can be a thing where there are certain of the processes that you can do at home and certain processes that you can, you know, go there and do. I know there are definitely people who are making knives at the Blacksmiths Guild of Central Maryland, where you see I usually have that t-shirt on, or Derek Kemper will have that t-shirt on the show, and that are making knives, and they basically take their knives to the guild, and that's where they harden them. So that's certainly something that you can look at.
All you need to make a knife is a file.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
So
that's how I made my first one, and it sucked.
I know. We are at time.
Yeah, we're at time, guys. I really appreciate you all coming out, and appreciate the questions, because the interaction is really kind of fun for us too, and makes the time go faster. So
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm not going to clap near this thing because it's way too sensitive.
You got big hands.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll be at the vendors hall tomorrow as well at the booth.
Yeah, we're here all day.
A few of us I know are going to be floating around the convention space tonight. I'm open if you want to chat. If you find me, just be like, hey, let me talk.
They're
blah, blah,
probably
blah.
just going to jump you outside the room, man. That's what these kinds of crowds do.
I'm going to go down and play Tempest.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, don't let the man play Tempest. It's
Thank you very much for coming out and joining us at MAGFest.
Thank you.